Before we begin, find a place where you feel comfortable and safe, because I don't want you to be startled in the middle of storytelling. This first story is called The Thing in the Costume Room. This happened about 6 years ago when I was 14. I'm not sure what reminded me of this experience, but I thought I'd share it here. This is a long one. It was a Sunday night around 7 p.m. or so, and I was at my church's West Campus for youth group. At youth group, we would often play hide and seek at the end of the night while we waited for our parents to come and pick us up. We always really enjoyed it because the West Campus has a lot of dark rooms in the basement to hide in. One room in particular was the costume room. The costume room was one of the last in the hallway and had 2 doors you could enter it from. One door was always locked, though, for whatever reason. The doors were about 6 to 8 feet away from each other, so if you picked the locked door, you could get to the unlocked door pretty fast. Something else about the costume room is that it is very cluttered. There are racks upon racks of clothing and different props everywhere. As you can imagine, the room had a lot of places where you could easily hide. On this Sunday, we finished early, so we had about 30 minutes to play hide and seek, which we were all stoked about. And so the game began. Let the games begin. We all quickly dispersed into the many rooms of the West Campus. As I ran down the hallway, many of the kids picked the closest rooms to hide in, which is also what I normally did, but everyone had beat me to those rooms, and I didn't want to hide with a bunch of other people. So I ran to the end of the hallway, to the costume room. The first door was locked, so I went to the second one and entered the dark room. Once I was inside, I hurried through all the clothing racks and made my way to the back and hid behind some props. As I was hiding, I could hear doors opening and closing and walking around outside in the hall. I was so focused on those sounds that I almost didn't notice the sound of shuffling on the other side of the room. My first thought was that maybe someone else had gotten here to hide before I did, so I whispered very quietly, "Hey, who else is in here?" I got no reply. My second thought was that there was probably a mouse or some kind of animal in there that was moving around. That was until some costumes on the rack had fallen down. At this point, my heart is racing. I started to think that someone was trying to scare me, and frankly, it was working. I whispered again, "Please, who's in here? This isn't funny." Again, I got no reply. I worked up some courage and decided to slowly make my way over to the other side of the room to find who was trying to prank me. When I had gotten to the rack where the clothes had fallen from, there was no one there. I picked the clothes off the floor and hung them back up because I was just gonna hide there now because I didn't want to move again and get caught by the seeker. By this time, I had been hiding for maybe 5 to 7 minutes at most. Then, suddenly, someone started knocking on the door. When I tell you, I nearly jumped out of my skin. At the same time the knocking happened, the props I had originally hid behind tumbled to the floor. I about had a heart attack. The knocking stopped. The sound that took its place was the sound of both door handles being wiggled, Is someone there? I popped up out of my spot and ran to the door. It was locked. I ran to the other door. It was locked. And the thing about this is that there was only one key to unlock the doors, and the person who had it was not there that night. So how the hell did the unlocked door I had entered through magically become locked? By now, I'm screaming and banging on the door with tears rolling down my cheeks. "Stop holding the door shut," my youth pastor yelled. "I'm not holding it," I screamed at the top of my lungs. Then, to put the cherry on top, an entire rack fell over. Like, not just the clothes on it, the whole rack. If I wasn't freaking the hell out yet, I definitely was now. I ran over to check the other door again, and now it was unlocked. So, you bet your sweet ass, I ran as fast as I could, right past my youth pastor and friends, right up the stairs and into the bathroom. About 2 minutes later, my friends followed me into the bathroom and asked me what had been so funny. They said, "We heard you laughing down there, and why did you break those props?" They heard laughing coming from the room I was in, but I didn't hear laughing, and I definitely wasn't laughing in there. I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. They thought I had planned this whole story to try and scare them. I don't know what else was in that room with me that night. By the sound of it, it got a good laugh, scaring the shit out of me. That is the end of that first creepy story. I love the setting in the story. It really builds you up. Just hiding in the costume room kind of reminds me of like The Conjuring for some reason. Like the hide and clap scene, sort of, just slightly. Okay, so this next story is called The Man in the Corner. My family's home wasn't very old. At the point my parents purchased it, it was probably only 20 to 30 years old. The neighborhood itself was very old, however, and heavily wooded. There were no streetlights or sidewalks, and across the street from the house was a patch of forest. When the sun went down, it got very dark, and it felt suffocating. My younger childhood years were quiet. I had a lot of nightmares as a child, though, and now that I'm older, I often wonder if maybe I had more than usual. When I got older and into my preteen years, I started feeling like I was being watched. The house has beautiful large windows that, during the day, let in a ton of warm sunshine and light, but at night, they make you feel like you're on display. I was constantly looking over my shoulder everywhere I went in that house. The shadows in the corners of the room felt eerie. A part of my mind always wondered if they held more than just darkened space. My eyes would flicker to them, trying to remain calm if something should appear. One night, he finally did. I had heard him before I saw him. Back in the day, we only had one computer in the house. I was on that computer after school when I heard a deep voice call out to me. "Hello." I was frozen. I looked around foolishly, even though I knew I was alone in the room. There was no one outside, no television on. I didn't have a cell phone yet. They were just starting to gain popularity, so there was no logical source to the sound. I skittered out of the room and to my mom in the kitchen to tell her what had happened. What I'll never understand was her dismissal herself, that is. I'm not sure how much it was later that I saw him. It could have been days or weeks. The years have blurred that detail. But what remains sharp is the image of him, standing behind me, watching. I was on that same computer, in that same spot that I heard him speak. It was late at night this time, and the feeling of eyes on my skin was making me feel squirmy. I was looking over my shoulder every few minutes, seeking that constant reassurance that yes, I'm still alone. The reprieve would only last minutes until that unshakable sensation would creep back and twist the pit of my stomach. So, again I turned and glanced behind my shoulder, but this time I was not alone. He was standing in the back corner facing me. The first thing I noticed was how big he was. He was enormous. He was tall and morbidly obese, with his large frame taking over the entire corner of the room behind me. I don't know how to describe it, but I could still see the wall behind him. It was like looking through a window. You can see that the window is there physically, but you can still see beyond it. I could see that he was balding, had a larger nose and a round face, but I could still see the wooden paneling behind him. He made no movements, no adjustments, no sign that he was acknowledging my learning of his presence. I froze for half a heartbeat, taking him in, and then turned right back around. The only thing I could think to do was pretend that I didn't see him. I slowly turned off the computer, gathered up my things, and turned around to head up to my room. He was gone, but the terror remained. I calmly walked upstairs and locked myself in my room. He didn't make his presence known again until a few years ago. In the meantime, the feeling of being watched remained a constant. The two other ghosts in my house I never saw physically, but I heard them. My mother and her babysitter, though, saw them both. They were two little girls. I was the first one home in the afternoon. My middle school was down the street, so it only took me minutes to walk home after school let out. I walked into the house and had only shrugged off my book bag when I heard laughter. The light giggling bounced off the walls and echoed throughout the entire house. I felt surrounded and I couldn't find the source. My heart leapt into my throat and lodged itself there. I did the only thing I could think to do. I screamed, "Get out of our house!" and ran out the door. I had to wait until my sister drove home from the high school before I re-entered. I never heard them again. They were on a loop, stuck forever doing the same exact actions without knowledge of their influence on our lives. My mom and babysitter confessed to seeing the exact same thing. I don't know why I only heard them, but I'm very glad I didn't see them as well. My mom was watering plants in the windowsill, keeping an eye on the reflections behind her to make sure me and my sister didn't try sneaking into the kitchen without her knowing. It was when she and I were still young children and couldn't be trusted alone in the kitchen safely. My mom heard us thunder down the stairs and watched in the reflection as we walked from the stairs, turned the corner, and wandered into the kitchen. She turned to stop us, calling out to the two of us, but turned to find the kitchen empty. My sister and I were upstairs still, playing in our room. Our babysitter claimed to have the exact same experience. I was the only one who experienced something different. The guy's very private moment. I can't tell you what he said, but his voice rang out loud and clear. We all jumped, and my father, the only man in the house at the time, called out to ask who was there. My parents never believed me about the ghost in the house. Even my mother denied it despite her own experiences, but they believe me now. That is the end of that awesome story. That gives me the chills imagining just like turning around and there's this obese, transparent man standing in the corner staring at you. That is so fucking scary. I cannot even. The reaction this person had, just turning back around and pretending they didn't see him, is just honestly very brave and probably a good move, maybe. Not sure. But that was a really cool story. I loved it, honestly. But now, let's move on to that third story I have. So, this third story is also a ghost story. The title is The Man in the Hat. This happened to me when I was about 9 to 11 years old. I was spending the summer in a smallish town in North Dakota with my dad. Typical divorce story. He lived in an old apartment building full of old people on a corner lot with huge trees. Out front was a plaque commemorating a church that once existed on that same spot. There was always a creepy vibe around the whole place, but not many tangible things happened. I do remember sleeping under a big comforter on a hot summer night and sweating profusely because I was too afraid to be exposed to whatever creepiness lurked in the dark corners of my room. There was one night that I heard the bathroom fan on and sink running, as if someone were brushing their teeth or shaving in the wee hours. He said it wasn't him, but who knows? On the day of my most memorable experience in that apartment, my dad was at work, so I was home alone at the apartment, doing what unattended kids did in 2001, drinking Mountain Dew and playing around on the internet. I was there all morning and all afternoon, enjoying my independence. Late afternoon rolled around, and I decided it was time to log off and ride my bike across town to Grandma's house. I turned off all the lights and shut the door to leave. I realized within a few seconds that I forgot to lock the door, so I turned around and reopened it. As I opened the door, I heard a rustling sound. It sounded like someone digging through plastic grocery bags under the sink. And then I saw him. There was a man standing in the kitchen, leaning cowboy style, with one bent leg against the counter sink area. He had a cowboy type hat on and was looking down. He was a solid black shadow, seemingly flat with no dimension. Then he turned his head to look up at me with white, stark, wide eyes that made no sense in a creepy white, slow smile. I screamed, "Holy shit!" I slammed the door shut, not caring that it was unlocked. I ran so fast down the 3 stories of stairs to get the heck out of that building into the safety of my grandma's house. Coincidentally, as I exploded through the front door of the building, I crashed into my dad, who was just getting home. I didn't explain anything to him and just kept going. I think that's messed up, to just leave your dad behind while you know there's some demon ghost upstairs in the apartment. That's funny. Okay, fast forward a few years later. I am a teenager living with Minnesota, I had a few girlfriends sleeping over at my house, and we were all camped out in the living room, which shares an open concept design with the kitchen. The next morning, one of my friends told me she saw a creepy man in the pantry of the kitchen. I told her it must have been my mom's boyfriend. She was creeped out and said, "No, that's definitely not him." She then described the man she saw. It was exactly what I had seen several years prior and a state away at my dad's. Each experience would be creepy on its own, but combined, I felt afraid, paranoid, and violated. How long has this been going on? Who is it? What is it? Is it there when I can't see it? So many questions. No sightings since, but many, many other paranormal experiences throughout my life. Looking online and reading other stories, I've come to find that this man in the hat is a common sighting, which is very strange. Seems like the man in the hat likes to be in the kitchen. That's pretty freaking crazy as well. I loved all of these stories. Paranormal stories really get me because it's the fear of the unknown, you know. I hope that you enjoyed these stories today. Did they help you sleep? Did they help you relax? Or are they just entertaining? Thank you for stopping